As Rachel mentioned, my name is Ryan Brandt. I am a CPA here at Withum. I lead up all the tax compliance for our cannabis plant touching companies here at the firm. This webinar is called Home Rule in New Jersey's Cannabis Licensing. So what does that mean? Home Rule. It involves the authority of the local government to prevent the state government intervention with its operations. So your local municipality is in control when making decisions based on cannabis licensing. It's not up to Governor Murphy anymore. The decision is in the hands of your mayor, your town council, and essentially your local government. So we're going to have an open discussion here about what's happening right here in New Jersey, and more specifically, what we're going to be seeing at the local municipality level. First thing we're going to explore is what are some of the challenges for our local governments right now. I think the big one is our lack of experience in cannabis. We're all guinea pigs in this stage. There's no roadmap to navigate because the law has not been finalized yet. So we don't know what we don't know. We're not just going to jump into it, okay? We're gonna also explore if towns are opting in, if they're opting out, and what does that mean for the future of those towns? Remember, there's still a stigma attached to cannabis. A lot of residents are not going to embrace this. So how are we going to navigate that? Who's going to deal with it? The second thing we're going to talk about is, what are the trends out there? How are municipalities taking control of this right now? Are they for it? Are they against it? And if they're for it, why are they for it? If they're against it, what are the reasons why they're against it? What's going on in the market right now? So just looking at the trends, what's happening out there. Also going to look at cannabis tourism. This is going to create a new gateway to additional revenue in the form of tourism and traffic from other towns. Is that the kind of tourism that these municipalities are going to embrace? I'm not sure. We're going to talk about it. And Lynn is also going to talk about how to engage municipalities. So if you're interested right now in getting involved in obtaining a license and you're in the process of site selection, who should you be talking with in order to set up shop? Certain questions you should be asking. What kind of discussions and considerations you have when approaching these municipalities, and what are municipalities looking for in certain applicants? We're going to go through all that. And then myself, I'm going to talk about just like the tax implications, what it means for New Jersey, how are they going to collect tax, where's the revenue going to go? I'm going to talk very quickly about the 3 levels of state and local tax. And I might as well, since I have the floor, I'll go through it right now. Take 5 minutes to go through the different types of taxes that are out there. There's 3 tiers, right? We're just going to talk about state and local right now. We're not going to talk about federal section 280E because I could speak all day on that. I've done webinars in the past. We're going to just hone in on New Jersey's tax. So we have 3 tiers. We have the sales tax, we have New Jersey excise tax or social equity excise fee, and we have the local transfer tax, okay? So just high level, brief overview. 1 in 3 Americans live in the state with legal sales of recreational cannabis. All of those states tax cannabis sales, okay? New Jersey is proposing somewhat of a different approach to their tax structure. And I'll get into that in a second, but let's look at sales tax. Sales tax in its very simple form is just sales tax. Recreational marijuana in New Jersey will be taxed under the general state sales tax rate of 6.625%. Simple as that. However, I want to make one note. Medical cannabis sales tax will be completely phased out by July 2022. So that's interesting because that might mean if you have your medicinal marijuana card, you might be able to be exempt from sales tax, okay, because it's prescribed to you. The second tier of tax is the excise tax. New Jersey's excise tax will tax cannabis based partly on weight and product and the price of the product. So think about that, weight and price. So why is that significance? Why is that of any significance to us? Because in other states that went recreation, adult use, they just tax exclusively around price. They don't even consider weight. So it's 20% of the sales price, 30% of the sales price, that goes to excise tax. In my opinion, this is not a good model because cannabis prices are going to inevitably drop, which means tax revenue is inevitably going to drop. So New Jersey has set up an insurance policy for this, right? Their model considers weight and the purchase price. So when the prices drop, weight is going to stay the same, and tax revenue is going to continue to flood in. So it's just interesting how we, spun that little tax collection process. I could also spend the whole hour on the structure of that. We won't get into that now. We're going to move on to some other things in this webinar. So where does the revenue go? 100% of the revenue from the excise fee and 70% of the percent of revenue from sales tax will be spent on social equity programs like grants, loans, reimbursements, financial assistance, especially in municipalities defined as impact zones. So these are all great programs that need to be funded anyway. Might as well do it through the revenue through cannabis. And the last tax I'm going to talk about, and I'm going fast here, is a local transfer tax. Okay, this is at the local municipality level, and it's an optional tax. Okay, it's a gross receipts tax that is capped at a 2% rate, so you can only tax up to 2% on each transaction. However, the tax can be imposed on multiple points in the process. Right, there's 6 classes of licensing. Okay, so if you have a cultivation license, and this is not going to happen in New Jersey right away. You can't be vertically integrated right now. But if you have those 6 licenses, if you're a holder of those 6 licenses, you're going to get taxed at 2% on the cultivation, on the processing, the manufacturing, and eventually down to the retail. So that tax is going to trickle down to every structure of your business. So just be aware of that. So that's a high level of what the taxes are going to look like. I mean, we're not considering federal taxes. This is a local tax. I'm going to shift this conversation and open it up to our panel. I know I really myself, I would like to know what's going on out there. I want to know what we can expect. I want to hear some of the pain points, and I want to hear how we're going to navigate it. And looking forward to hearing from everybody here at the panel. You want to shift it over to Mayor? Mayor, you mind taking a stab at it?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Ryan. So already we have our first question. Is there a link listing which municipalities are opting in? And at this point in time, there is no list of towns that are opting in or out. Right now, it's word of mouth, communities that are talking to one another. And from the league has never taken a position, for or against cannabis, because we have 565 municipalities, and each municipality has its own opinion about where it's going to go. And yes, while overwhelmingly residents have asked and supported legalization, from the municipal perspective, our issues that we deal with is the land use aspect of it, and how we're going to, what do the rules look like? So we know that the CRC is meeting, we know that the CRC has to promulgate the rules. Unfortunately, their rules are due the same day that is our 180-day opt-out. So towns have an option to opt out, and you have to do it within the 180 days, which means by August 21st, we need to have adopted the ordinance, or we're automatically in, and we're in for 5 years. So the beauty of the opt-out is that we can opt out now and opt back in on day 190 or 100 or 200, whatever it may be. Once the rules are there and have something for us to work from, I think is going to be key. That's the biggest frustration that I hear from other mayors and from other elected officials in other communities. There are towns that have actively said, yes, we are in 100%, we want to be here. It doesn't, others are kind of waiting to see a little bit where some towns are going to be, and others have just said, no, not now. We are not opposed, but until we understand the land use, because ultimately that's what this comes down to, right, is what's our ability, how is municipal land use law going to be impacted? And if we are in, does that mean we lose control of our zoning? And those are the issues that we deal with on a regular basis. That's the biggest question I have as a mayor. I'm a proponent of the legalization and decriminalization of it, but I want to know that as a mayor, I also have that ability to manage where and how and what we're going to allow in our community. And that's going to come when the rules are promulgated.
Man, where does your town stand on adult use, and what are the differences between the municipalities that are opting in and the ones that are uncertain? Why are they so sure and the majority of them are not?
Yeah, I think it runs the gamut. So in my town, we're having the discussions. I'm leaning, and again, I'm leaning to opt out until I see the rules. Having experienced other instances where, not knowing what the rules are going to be, and if they come back in a negative, or what I would perceive as a negative in my ability to manage, I wouldn't want to be forced, is how I look at it. I don't know that towns are, there's any rhyme or reason to it. There are towns that are absolutely 100% saying, listen, we want this, we are open to it. I've talked to Flemington, I've talked to Phillipsburg, towns that have said yes. They've raised their hand, they've said, we're here, we're ready for it. They have the ability to manage it within their community. Town like Clinton's 1.3 square miles. I have a walking school district. I have other considerations that I have to deal with. I've got residents that are that believe in it, but are still trying to come to grips with it. That, you're changing, and I think I said this the other day, you're changing 60 years of behavior in 60 days. And it takes time. People need to be comfortable with this. I think it's like after Prohibition, right? People were so concerned about liquor, and now alcohol is not the issue that we would think it is. I think cannabis gets us there as well, but it's not an immediate. It's got to be a thoughtful approach, and it could be that towns that are considering opting out meet the right partner and say, you know what, all right, we're willing to take the chance. We have, the space, the location, whatever it may be. This is the right partner for us. But the biggest and most important thing I have to say is creating a partnership, because you are going to become part of a community, and this is new to everyone. So a good community partner is someone that's going to listen and understand where it is you want to move into, and what's important to those residents and to those community leaders.
What's the economics of it? And maybe this is a question for the mayor and for Ryan, but from a municipal perspective, everybody thinks of cannabis as a gold rush, and and everybody's going to be swimming in dough. But is that the reality on the municipal side?
Personally, I don't think we're not going to be swimming in lots of money. It will be a boost to revenue. And for towns that have experienced difficulties over the last couple of years, through loss of businesses and what COVID did to their communities, they may be more open to some of those discussions. But, there's still, not only are we talking about the CRC promulgating rules, but we still have legislative initiatives that are being addressed to answer questions that get raised each time. I have a police department. Police officers are wanting to understand their role in this and what role they will play. So these are all the pieces. And yes, money can be a driving factor, but I don't know that it is that gold rush, not for a municipality anyway. Maybe for some, especially when you get to a vertically integrated, when we can get to a vertically integrated where you're going to collect up to 7% tax, you might see something there. It might be beneficial, and it might, the cost can outweigh the benefits of putting a business within a community. And that applies to any business that you want to bring in. I'm going to look at anyone that wants to come to my town, regardless of the type of business, is that it can't cost me more or cost more in services than what it's going to create in revenue for a community.
Has there been any thought to host community agreements like we see in other states, Massachusetts, for example, as a way to kind of boost the community engagement and economic incentives?
I think that's always an option. I think each town has to look at it. I think there's also the making sure that a host agreement is legal and can't be challenged in court, and that someone doesn't, it's balancing that the need for services and funding, but not agreed that would then create another issue. So again, a lot of balances that we all have to kind of take into consideration. And I think, one of the things the league is doing is we host webinars regularly on different aspects of cannabis, and we bring in different individuals to talk about, what is the impact? What's the impact to business owners who, now that recreation is legal, what is their responsibility to their employees? What's the employer's responsibility? All of these pieces that kind of are still out there.
Lynn, you've been waiting patiently. How do you get into a community?
Well, because government relations is what I do, and this may seem like it's a bit of a commercial, but not really. You have to get to know the community that you want to locate in. You have to become part of that community. And obviously the first place you're going to go is to the mayor, to the council. Frequently there may be one member of the council who is about this. The majority is okay, the mayor is okay, but you might still have to court that individual. But that's just the start. And I think no matter where you live or that businesses that are successful integrate themselves into the community and become part of it and want to be supportive of it. The classic, my son, when he played Little League, the name of the business on the back of the t-shirt. And maybe that's probably not a good example for cannabis. And I still laugh, remember when he was playing, and luckily he had the name of the pizzeria, but he was playing against another team who had the funeral home. I was really glad my son had the pizzeria on the back of the shirt. But talking to the Chamber of Commerce in town, talking to faith leaders. Faith leaders have a tremendous amount of sway and can make a big difference in how the community is going to feel about things. Other community activists, and really getting to know where you are, what makes that town tick, what are the issues that are important to them. Where I happen to live in Metuchen, keeping shade trees, making it a walking community, things that you can support that are important to the community. We're willing to assist you with A, B, C, or D. If you're a grow facility, for example, you may very well want to meet with the Environmental Commission if the town has one, because they would be like, whoa, what about the odor? What are you going to do with that? So you have to know where you're going and know what every town has something different that makes it tick. And you have to know that if you're going to be successful. And at the state, while all politics is local, as the wonderful Tip O'Neill said, at the same time, you can't ignore what's happening in Trenton on the state level. And Mayor Kovach certainly referred to that. We have the Cannabis Regulatory Commission that is just formed, and they are going to have the power to adopt the regulations that will implement the law. They can't go beyond what the law says. The law is the overarching structure, but those regulations can make a big difference, and it needs to be aware of how the CRC is working, what's the timeline for those regulations, what's going to be the plan on how they make determinations of who gets a license and who doesn't. And as the mayor also pointed out, well, the legislature right now is in sort of cannabis fatigue. They went through months and months of getting to the legislation that is now on the books. But at the same time, we see legislators introducing new bills all of the time. Whether these are going to move all the way through. And a good example is Senator Gopal from Monmouth County just introduced a bill that got pretty high level of coverage that will expand the number of towns that are designated as impact zones to towns in Monmouth County near where he lives. So you have to be aware of what's going on, governmental wise, public relations wise. It's not just a matter of finding, you know, I want this plot of land and it's available. It's a matter of making sure that you're aware of what's happening up here and that you are being a good citizen within the community that you want to locate.
We are a home rule state.
Absolutely.
Is there a preference on the municipal level for out-of-state operators or multi-state operators versus local New Jersey folks and navigating that dynamic?
I think there's always a preference for someone who understands Jersey or is from New Jersey. And that's any business. I don't know that any of us, you know, would not look at that as a benefit. But at the same time, we also would be looking at someone or individuals who are experienced. You know, this is new to all of us. I've had the benefit of doing the research and spending time in other states to understand how they've worked. And the one thing that has always been said is make sure that you have an experienced operator who understands all aspects of the industry and not just someone who's just like, oh, I want a license, I want to sell. You know, because it's the cool new thing to do. It is so important to get this right the first time, because if we don't, it becomes harder to continue to have it grow. Bad pun, I'm sure. But having that connection to someone who is community minded, community focused, but also knowledgeable and can answer questions in a way that, I don't want someone who is going to sell me. I want someone who's truly passionate about the work that they do and why they do it. I get that there's obviously financial benefits and, you start a business for the financial reasons, but something like this is more of a passion project, I think, for a lot of individuals that start. So knowing that there's that tied to it, I know one operator I had met with at one point in time, they were doing it, they had a need within the family and did their research and became, slowly but surely built their business and created something that is multi-state. They did it for the reasons that were important, and that's really, that was something that got to me as a mayor. So to me, that's a community-minded individual. I don't need someone who is just in it for the money, is going to come in and, burn down and start over and just pull money out. This is a partnership, and it has to be a partnership.
I know, Lynn, that's the first thing you're always telling clients. I mean, come up with an identity, who you are, your narrative, other than just, I want to get a license and start making some money.
Exactly. And I think the benefit I've seen from entities that are already operating in other states is that they can come in and show the pictures, and if this is what our facility looks like in Massachusetts or Colorado, and it's beautiful and it's clean and it's a benefit to, this is what the outside looks like. It's not going to be an eyesore. This is what we're doing to deal with traffic. This is what we've done in the past on so many levels to be able to demonstrate what their experience is. So that's where someone who's already done this has the benefit, but someone who doesn't also has, as the mayor was saying, the community connection. But you have to show you've done your homework, okay? We haven't done this before, but this is how we're going to do it. We've seen how it's done elsewhere. And this is what we want it to look like. This is how we want to, whatever you're going to be doing, whether you're in grow or in dispensing, this is something the community is going to be very proud of.
As I listen to you guys, I'm thinking about, these businesses coming through in New Jersey, and I know the bill has carved out some space for some micro licenses. I'm wondering if these are not, is that going to appeal to some of the non-business savvy entrepreneurs? Like they're just getting into it for the sake of getting into it? Because I know they cap the amount of production you could do, the amount of revenue that comes in. They're smaller types of businesses, and they might just be, people who are just starting up. I'm not sure if that's, the demographic of these micro licenses. But yeah, I would definitely agree that you need to build your team before you play the game, right? Before you become operational, you need to have, your an attorney in your back pocket. You need to have an accountant. You need to have insurance, and you need to have that team of people who are knowledgeable in this industry already, or else you're going to sink. You're going to hit a bunch of pitfalls, and it's going to be a cleanup game from day one till you're underground. So you just it's really being business savvy. Yeah, it's a cannabis business, but it's still a business, right? You're still running a business. You need to be savvy in it. You need to deal with customers. You need to deal with regulations. It's a highly regulated environment, so it's very hard to keep on top of all that. And I'm just, as I'm listening to you guys talk, it's like, I'm not. You think those micro licenses are gonna, bring in some of those, entrepreneurs that are kind of just dabbling in the business? Or I don't know if that's what you guys are seeing, but that's just a thought.
Yeah, it's an easier entry point for sure. So I think there's a ton of interest on it, and you get preference in pursuing it that way, and so I think there's just a ton of interest. But people are still looking for their identity, and I don't know what the reception is in terms of the municipality. I would imagine that they do want that local presence, since it's conditioned on a local presence, residency requirements, like 51% in the host or neighboring municipality. So I think that must be appealing from a municipal perspective, but the harder part is figuring out what they're bringing and what they're offering to the community, I would think.
Right. And they're still going to be vetted out. I mean, they're still going to ask for, budgeted forecasts, compliance with Section 280E, all these things that, business savvy people know about, but, they're going to have to learn. It's a learning process, but they're still going to have to abide by it. So it's a good point.
Yep. And on that point, it's a really tough issue for a micro business, right? Because these are startups. Some of them may have prior experience, but a lot of them don't, and funding is limited. And if you need to engage in the municipal process, particularly bringing on professionals to help you with that, which in many cases you need, it's a hard thing. And now we're seeing some trends where some of the municipalities are coming out with their own licensing programs, competitive licensing, like Bayonne. I always pick on Bayonne at every moment that I have to do it, but they've set up their own licensing scheme. So now you have to deal with the local one, and you also have to deal with the state one, two different application processes, and that just increases the likelihood of litigation, from my perspective, which is good for lawyers, but it's not good for for the applicants. And so I'm interested in the mayor's thoughts on those types of emerging municipal perspectives, and how they're dealing with that.
I've not heard a lot of towns that are creating their own licensing. I think, again, we're all still, we came out of COVID, or still are coming out of COVID, and now jumping right into this. While we would have spent more time, I think, in the lead up to the question, getting a better understanding, we've not had that opportunity. So I don't know that there's a real answer to the licensing. I think towns that are looking to truly manage it and kind of be the lead want to make sure that when they create this licensing, that they've got the ability to control what happens within their community, right? Because again, the rules aren't promulgated. So does the licensing that they're creating give them that ability to manage from that perspective? And when the rules come out, does some of that get relaxed? When you start seeing something so new and trying to manage through it, and municipalities are dealing with, I'm still dealing with garbage and potholes and all the other stuff at the same time, trying to answer questions and get people to a point where they're comfortable in understanding what this is going to look like. So I think you're going to see a lot of different aspects of it. Again, 565 municipalities, home rule.
And that's the trouble with opting in, right? You don't know how much revenue it's going to bring in. Yeah, it might fill some budgetary gaps, but you don't know by how much. And it's just, I'm wondering, this is a question you guys might know, is there a race to opt in? I mean, is it like, let's opt in before the other towns, or is it like, I don't really see the benefit to straight up opting in when you don't know what's going to happen. You don't really know what you don't know.
No, I think the towns that are just opting in are towns that have done their homework. They may have identified operators that they're willing to work with, and have started that process. Or they're a larger community that has the ability to, for multiple locations, whether it's an industrial zone, a commercial zone that's appropriate, not in the middle of a residential or a school district. Those are the things that come to mind, when I'm looking at it, when other mayors are looking at it. So I don't know that it's a race. Some may look at it as a race, especially those that think that it's going to be a financial windfall.
Right.
And I hope it is for them. You know what? I'm willing to let them have that financial windfall if they're ready for it and they're prepared for it. That, that's the beauty of who we are as the state of New Jersey, is that we can do that. But I think we're all trying to help one another understand. I don't look at it. I mean, listen, I'm always up for a good competition. I'll challenge another mayor to almost any kind of thing imaginable. I don't know that I really want, I don't want to challenge this right now.
$50K licensing fees, by the way, in Bayonne, $50K on a local level, on top of what you're paying on the state. So just
Is that the one time, or is that going to be did it say?
There's an annual renewal fee too, but I think that was just for the initial, yeah. What about preferences in terms of license types? And I know, Lynn, you've been dealing with this too. Are towns looking at any one more favorable than the other? Do we like dispensing, retail over cultivation, manufacturing, or is it, specific to the geography and the demographics? I mean, how are you seeing that play out?
Well, what I've seen is that certainly cultivation, manufacturing, a much easier sell, especially if, it depends, the size of the town and how densely populated the town is. But if it's a town where you've got open space and the cultivation is going to be taking place, way off from the road, and I think towns feel more comfortable with that. I think the dispensary is sort of, people can't wrap their minds around it. Is it going to be in the middle of my downtown? Are my children going to be walking by it on their way to school? But then, I've also heard, and this was in a community that is open to having medical facilities there, that they sort of see it as potentially part of a whole rebirth, where you've got like a small theater and you have a few restaurants, and then you would have a dispensary, and that's all part of like social tourism you were talking about, that you go out for dinner on a Saturday night. It's maybe a little, you go to the restaurant, you go see a show, and then you stop in the dispensary with your friends when everybody can go out again in a more way that we were still limited in doing. So that can be viewed as positive, in a community that's already sort of embracing this and sees that it can just reinforce what they're already trying to do as with the arts and restaurants and things like that.
Hey, you mentioned something, like it's part of a restaurant scene. I was on vacation with my wife last week, and we're going through the brochure. We're like, oh, there's wineries and breweries. I'm thinking down the line, it's gonna be like, oh, there's dispensaries. Honey, you like dispensaries? Come on. But yeah,
they have that in California, where you can go on a wine tour, and you'll get on a little bus and go from winery to winery? Will they do that with able to go and sample different?
It's still new, right? It's still new. We're not there yet.
I think we're looking at that.
In California, people, of course, now here when we did, you have to keep the olden days when we did socialize and people invited you over for dinner and you brought the nice bottle of wine. Well, in California, you bring, and they even have like special containers, and you bring your little container of cannabis, and that's like a socially acceptable thing to do.
I'm just thinking this is a question for the mayor, I think, and I'm not really aware of the local laws. But when you opt in, right, are you fully opting in for all of those license classes? And if so, is it like, okay, now anybody with a retail license can set up shop in the vacant store? Is that how it works?
So it's not. If you do nothing, you're opted in for everything. That's the way it works. You have to actively opt out, and you can opt out of everything or specific aspects of it, specific licenses. You don't have to, I could say, okay, I don't want a dispensary, but I've got an industrial tract that might be appropriate for a grow facility, cultivation, manufacturing. Those are the things that you can do. But if you do nothing, you are in for everything.
And anybody can just come in and set up shop? Is that how it works, or?
You still need to get the town, I believe, is still going to have to sign off, because I think the state licensing is going to require that. It
Okay.
will be harder for the town to say no if it is, I guess if the case is made for an appropriate location. It can't be, I don't like where you want to go, so no, you can't come here.
And if you don't take any formal action,
Right,
you're gonna be opted into certain areas, right? So retail is going to be in commercial. It's going to be a conditional use, but it'll be in commercial, and then everything else will be in industrial zone.
right.
But is there any reason why a municipality wouldn't take formal action that they would just default in without? Is there any benefit to that?
If they're 100% on board with any aspect of it, they've got the capability to support any aspect of the industry, then there's no need for them to do anything around it. They could set up, they could do some zoning, and identify subzones of industrial or commercial. I don't know, again, until the rules come out, it's hard to say whether or not those would hold if they were challenged.
What about medical? Has the adult use push refocused any local attention on medical, or made it more welcoming for certain towns that may have been opposed to it previously?
I don't know. I've not heard anything. There were towns that opted out of the medical when that first became legal. Most of us just kind of did nothing. One, because there weren't a lot of licenses out there, and no one was banging down the door, to put a medical facility in anywhere. I think now we're at a different place, especially as you're seeing more and more states legalize the recreational use. So now you've got the multi-state operators who it's financially beneficial for them to come into New Jersey. I don't think for the medical aspect it was as financially beneficial. And at the time, towns weren't getting anything specific from any of those dispensaries, but you have, 6 licenses? And those took a long time to have happen. Sometimes we sit back and wait to see what's going to happen. And I think this time is just, again, nothing. It's not an opposition to the recreational use. It's a concern about our ability to manage our zoning. That's the crux of where I know a lot of municipalities are at.
Now, if you're going to be a license holder, are you going to be, well, let's say you have a dispensary. Now, is there going to be separate medicinal and separate recreational, or is it all just going to be commingled? It doesn't really matter. I'm not really sure how that's going to work here in Jersey. Maybe that's something that's in the bill. But I know other states have, you know, a door for medicinal, a door for recreational. Or are we just going to have, you know, smorgasbord of everything? You could use your card, you don't need it, whatever. I mean, is it going to be free range like that?
I would hope we don't bifurcate. I think it is, I've been in both kinds of dispensaries. I've been in Colorado where they bifurcate the medical from the recreational, and you get buzzed into one door, then you get buzzed into another door.
Right.
I felt like a criminal, you know, in all honesty, when I go out to Colorado. When I go to, you know, when I've been out to dispensaries in California, it's a much softer feeling. You know, there's not buzzing of doors. They're checking IDs to make sure you're of age to go in. And when you make your purchase, if you have a medical card, you don't pay tax. If you don't have a medical card, you pay tax. You know, it's a much better experience that I had in California than what I did in Colorado.
Under the bill, there's not supposed to be a separation. We'll see what that looks like in practice, but that's what the bill says.
So really the only reason to have a medical card is to not pay sales tax. It's like you're getting out of jail free card for sales tax.
Well, I think there's all depending too. You can get you can either purchase a larger quantity or it's a different strength, is my understanding, if you have a medical card. But I don't have a medical card, so I don't know. I'm just going based on what I've been told.
And I think in the 2 meetings that the Cannabis Regulatory Commission has had, the bringing up medical, like every conference, everything that they say, they're weaving medical in there. That seems to be a very important aspect to them that they don't want forgotten.
And it shouldn't be. You know, that is an important piece of where we are right now. There are a couple of questions. Do we want to start to hit them?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one more thing, and just about the potential effect of, you know, being in an election year on how municipalities may conduct themselves. Just thought it was worth pointing out.
There's an election every year in New Jersey. So
I stand corrected then, but still, does that have any impact given the timing?
for some towns, possibly, you know, especially if there is a, you know, a community that's opposed. Or vice versa, where the community's in support, but the electeds are opposed. You know, there's still a lot of misinformation that needs to be addressed. And I think a key is education around cannabis. You know, again, I've taken the time, but as an elected official, I had a responsibility. I think operators have, you know, if they're interested in doing business in New Jersey, they have an opportunity and a need to really help educate the community to understand, you know, cannabis, its uses. You know, there's a lot. I'll go back to everyone's thinking that it's someone smoking a joint. I know in what I've seen, it's not necessarily that. It's the topicals, it's edibles, it's and I forget what someone had given me statistics on percentages, but the percentage of smoking was much lower than any of the the topicals or edibles that were out there. So, you know, it's all those pieces. It's just, again, 60 years and 60 days is a lot to take in and absorb.
We want to go to some of these questions. One question is about the odor. Do we know that the large indoor cultivation facilities can control odors so it does not negatively impact the community? That's a problem, right? It's a pungent odor.
That's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
There have been issues. There have been ongoing issues with several facilities in New Jersey. So, and obviously it's a part of your application process. You need to have an odor mitigation plan in place. And, you know, from a community engagement perspective, if you don't want to be hostile with your neighbors and you don't want to potentially be sued for RICO type allegations, it's good to have that under control.
Are you seeing many towns opting in for grow but not dispensing, or vice versa? What are the factors towns are considering in choosing one versus the other? I think we touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there a concern about the continuation of the black market? Yeah, so I think, you know, I have clients out in the West Coast, and the illicit market is, I believe, 80% of the sales, or, you know, or the consumption. So there's always going to be a problem with the illicit market. It's not until the prices start to drop that we're going to see, you know, retail stores thriving, and the illicit market is just going to be no longer. But, you know, that's going to take some time. And as I mentioned with the tax rates and everything else, we kind of we built in the fact that, you know, once the rates do drop, we can almost compete with the illicit market, and it puts them out of business. So yeah, it's going to continue for the next couple of years. It's inevitable. It'll be there. People are going to grow indoors. People are going to grow at their home. They're going to have their own. They're going to sell their own. They're going to do their thing. You know, it's going to be like like it is now, right? We have the illicit market at this point. Yeah, so it'll continue. People are set in their ways.
What about
Certainly,
gray
it
market?
depends on access, and you know, as you know, facilities open, but if you have to drive 35 miles to get to a legal dispensary versus
Your neighbor.
the person, you know, around the block, yeah, you know, I mean, of course, delivery is now a part of this, so that is a hopeful avenue to discourage using the black market if you can get it easily, versus, you know, again, or maybe you don't have a car and you have to take mass transit, you know, it's just
Right.
And the taxation is a key part. I think that's a problem in Oregon, I believe, because the taxation is so high there.
Okay, here's a good question. Can adjoining towns collaborate on licensing? One town agrees to restrict licensing to cultivation manufacturing only, and the adjoining town agrees to retail only. I think it was an opt-in, opt-out thing, right? Where it was only one or the other, or?
Well, you can opt into just pieces of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, listen, collaborating between towns is a great opportunity, and more towns that are willing to work together, I think definitely goes a long way. Keep in mind, I mean, especially for small towns, you know, you put something in, or another town puts it right on a border of another town. You know, what's the impact in that respect, and what does the border town have the ability to weigh in? It's like warehousing, right?
Right.
Yeah, that could be interesting depending on what kind of property is available, and you know, so if you have heavily, you know, densely populated area right next to a place where there's just tons of warehouse, and you could have retail in one and then do it that way, kind of, you know, what people are trying to do with interstate compacts. It hasn't gotten very far, but same kind of thing, you know, West Coast producing states, East Coast consumption states. So theoretically you could do that, but I can't think of any other real basis other than property available and you know, the amount of people that would factor into that, since the state is so small. But it's an interesting idea.
Okay, are there any laws in place regarding growing at home?
Yes,
Silly.
can't do it. Can't do it.
Not
I would
yet.
say though, I think if the legislature is likely to act on something in the near future, I think there's certainly been a lot of talk about allowing home grow, but right now it is illegal.
Are we the only state to allow homegrown?
That does not.
That's recreation, that has adult use. I thought I read something like we're the only state maybe in the country that has adult use, but not home grow.
But the home grow, my understanding, the Colorado home grow is it's someone who is who collects patients and can grow for those individuals. You can have up to so many plants per individual. That was how I think it was initially set up, if I remember correctly in my conversations. But I think I didn't think California had home grow. Does it?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. My
And
special.
What's that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The 1,000-foot doesn't come into play here. Someone did ask that question. So I believe, my understanding is that there's not a 1,000-foot buffer from the school based on the legislation, if I read it correctly. It doesn't meet the drug-free school zone requirements, correct?
Because it's removed from the Controlled Substances Act if it's from the regulated market, at least on a state level. But then you still have the federal 1,000-foot restriction. So I mean, if the municipality allows it, that's in consideration. But you still got to be worried about the Fed component, I think. But yeah, that seems to be the case.
Yeah, so somebody mentioned California can now legally grow up to 6 marijuana plants at home, including all of the harvest from those plants.
Okay.
The adult use law contains a max of 37 grow facilities. Please clarify if the total is reduced by the current medical grows.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It includes all existing licensees plus the 4 vertically integrated and 5 additional cultivation that are supposed to be awarded from the 2019 round that will never end.
Kind of like affordable housing and growth share.
Yes.
Okay, any other thoughts before we end our webinar? I think that was all our questions.
I had one, and I was going to put this out there. I wanted to know what people's thoughts were on gray market activity since we covered legacy activity. But the gray market, we all know what's going on in Trenton. People are opening up shops, or they're gifting. The bill allows transfer without remuneration, but assuming the product comes from a regulated facility, which none of this product is, maybe coming from a regulated facility in California, but not New Jersey. So I'd just be interested in the municipal perspective on those types of operations because they're happening.
Mm-hmm. From my perspective, I'm not open to that. Anything that's a gray area legally gets the municipality in a lot of trouble. We don't win in those situations in any way, shape, or form. For the legacies that are out there, I would leave it to each mayor to really look at what's in the best interest and what are the risks that you're taking on by allowing it. I don't have deep pockets for lawsuits.
So, I mean, what is the gray? Can you explain that again, Allie? So they have, like in Trenton, for example, they have legal facilities distributing to illegal facilities. How does that work?
They're unlicensed dispensaries, taking the position that cannabis is now legal constitutionally, so they should just be able to sell freely without having to go through the expensive licensing process. I mean, that's their stance on it. They capitalize on that gifting provision in the bill, and I guess the assumption is that law enforcement is not going to ask you where your product is coming from. Or really have no way of verifying that. So if you're caught within, a legal amount, you could just say it's been gifted to me, and therefore,
isn't that like a liquor license? Like, I mean, if a restaurant doesn't have a liquor license, they can't sell liquor, right?
Well, depending. I mean, they could partner with a winery or a brewery to sell their product.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so they have, there's operators. There are websites where people are openly delivering product across the state. You buy a brownie for $60, and you know you get some product at the discretion of the driver.
Okay.
And I
Great.
believe law enforcement is tolerating it. I mean, that's my understanding. It's being tolerated.
I think they're waiting for direction as well. You know, again, it's where having hard and fast rules sometimes really makes our job much easier, and knowing what that line is and not to cross that line. And what's the tolerance for allowing or turning that blind eye? You know, in a community like mine, it would be something like that would stand out, and maybe in Trenton it doesn't stand out. You know, again, we're unique in our own way.
Well, I think that's all we have, unless you guys have any other thoughts, comments. I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to thank the mayor for joining. It was a real treat having you.
Thank you.
Ellie, as always, great to have you. Lynn as well. Appreciate all the insight. And I want to thank our audience for joining. You know, these webinars are great. I get a lot of good information out of them. I'm sure you guys do too. And looking forward to doing some more in the future. Stay in touch and reach out to any of us with any questions. If we haven't answered anything in the panel, be happy to catch up with you offline. But for now, appreciate it. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.